And I think those are the critical issues. Let's harmonize. Let's work on what we do in South Africa should also happen in Zambia, should happen in Nigeria, should happen anywhere, so that it's easier. I'm quite happy that I now eat Kenyan avocados. But there's the other thing, I ate quail in Zambia. Quite a lot of people don't know what quail is. It's a small ngukunyana, just a small chicken. It's delicious. But you see, we can't have that quail coming to South Africa because it will kill our entire industry in terms of poultry farming. Incidentally, in Europe they want, what is this big bird? Ostrich meat. And then some crazy bird flies from China or Japan, lands somewhere in Cape Town or in some other part of South Africa, carrying what is called bird flu. I'm just talking about standards. So let's harmonize and get our biotech working very rapidly. We need rapid responses. We need very innovative strategies where all of us do the same thing and do it effectively, efficiently, and cost effectively. I think that's about the only thing I can think of. Harmonize, get our standards together, have rapid issues, and all these issues must talk to each other. So that then I should not be denied the pressure. You know, Zambian mangoes are very nice. I'm inviting you all to come to Zambia, so that you can eat the mangoes now. They will be in season, and you come back here and compare with the mango in the north of the country. Our mango is not nice. It's got so many strings. The Zambian mango is so nice. I want to, but I can't bring those mangoes here. For the simple reason that if I bring it, they will be the first to, he will be the first to tell me I'm doing a wrong thing. And I'll be arrested quite likely, because I would have brought in diseases in this country. So I think that for me would be something that I would want this meeting to go out and ensure, in whatever zone that you are, in whatever region that you are, to just appeal for our expertise. Let's stop talking about where we've had so many conferences. There are so many conferences, and all of us know these things. We know them. You know, I'm sitting with experts here. I'm just an income. I'm just sitting with experts here who know these things. And we're still sitting here, and I'm not eating Zambian mango in South Africa.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I'm actually from up north in the country, so I'd definitely take you up on that offer. Maybe over to you, Dr. Libia, just maybe to sum it up before we open up for questions. You mentioned that you work quite a lot with colleagues within the African continent, and you obviously know some of the lived experiences of farmers and biotechnologists. And what are some of the barriers to entry? Because Ambassador Tola mentioned issues of phytosanitary requirements, etc. What are some of the barriers to entry to developing a strong African livestock export program, especially with the rise of and the popularization of the AFCFTA as the Agenda 2063 flagship program?
Thank you, ma'am. One of the things that I can at least allude to, and I'll start even here at home. If you look at Botswana, Namibia, and South Africa, these are about the 3 countries in the continent that actually export to Europe. And for your benefit, the export for beef is probably 2 to 2.5 times in money than what you would get if you sold nearby. So it means already the wealth exists. It's just how do we convert that wealth to real money in export. Why are these the only 3 countries that export? Because they took a concerted effort to do the surveillance within their country to make sure that those diseases we're talking about are actually monitored, and we can isolate them to one area or the other. Very much like COVID. You have strains that will not work with this vaccine and works with the other ABCD. We have to do that. Now, what does it mean? It means, unlike COVID, most of these viruses and pathogens are specific to our regions. So when you buy a one-size-fits-all, it doesn't fit everyone. To others it looks better, to others it looks worse. You can style it, but it doesn't work. It's the same with the animals as well. So what do we need to do? It means the capacity itself. And here I would say there's a lot of opportunity, and I'm glad Maburu has highlighted that SMEs in Africa or in South Africa that has at least a bit of the luxury of some of the infrastructure that's available. It is our turn to develop things that are useful to us, but are useful to other places as well. And while there are barriers to entry, I find a lot of African countries very receptive. We do work in Zambia, Angola, Lesotho, we go to Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, even South Sudan. We go to those places. People are usually very receptive and want to see a product. And it's not true that there's no money in the continent. There's plenty of it. The reason being you don't need all of it. You just need the amount that you need for the services you provide. And those services are there. So you find there are countries, believe it or not, where you literally are unable to buy a chicken that has been grown in that country at an official level. I won't mention countries, that would be unethical of me. But what I'm meaning is, what is the problem? The problem is there's the Newcastle disease, or there's bronchitis for chicken. Therefore, when you try and grow the chickens, half of them die. But the vaccines for that are known. What is the difference? The strain in that country, nobody is making it. Why are the big pharma not making it? Because for them, 1 unit is 10 million doses. And here you can only sell 500,000 doses. Now, 500,000 doses times 15 rand is a lot of money for me. It means for us as SMEs and identifying these programs, that's what we should do, and at least get out of the country, collaborate with other people, and we're able to come up with something for ourselves, but also for the continent. So there are barriers, but I would also want to emphasize that there are a lot of opportunities within the continent.
Thank you very much for that. That we shouldn't cry that we have a lot of problems, but appraise that perhaps maybe something is also working, and highlight that and profile that and take it up. Thank you very much, everyone. I don't know if there's any questions. I'd like to open it up for questions and answers. I'll use my mic.
Thank you very much, Program Director, and to the panelists. I must say that I'm excited to actually see us as Africans, including the A discussion on science and technology and innovation when we talk about the AFCFTA. I've actually known it through my work previously in the standard space, so we talk about it because standards must be there to support. But I think what we've forgotten is to link competitiveness to science and innovation, and say actually we need that in order for our countries to be competitive and for this agreement to work. I just wanted to share that based on what the panelists were saying, there's actually already bodies that harmonize standards on the continent, and the focus has been to make sure that they prioritize standards that are there to support and facilitate the AFCFTA. What is missing though is the scientific aspect to it. You will mostly see the private sector participating together with standards bodies like the SABS, but the scientists are not there. I know that the SABS even has a committee to develop standards for innovation management, but you hardly see the scientists there who are supposed to inform the process. So my call is really to encourage the research councils, the academics that are here to really participate in that, so that the standards that come out of these committees talk to the realities of what we have. well known that knowledge generation in the world, actually we contribute a lot to that as Africans. So let's do it for ourselves. Let's sit in the committees, let's develop the standards that will support our own trade agreement. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that intervention, and quite insightful in that regard. Is there anyone else? Okay. Sorry, cameraman.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for a lot of insight. I think I heard you mention something about agriculture and livestock being one of the biggest, would I say, economic drivers in the continent. And with that, in the same breath, you mentioned the challenges that come with sharing of mangoes and avocados between countries as a result of, I don't know whether it's standards or health practices. I'm not too sure. I'm not an expert in that area. So that leaves us with basically commodities like IT, automobiles, automotive manufacturing, pharmaceutical manufacturing, and perhaps in those particular areas we would see the AFC, FTA playing a significant role. But the challenge that we face there is most of the, at this stage, most of the impact that would be needed in those sectors needs to be imported. In other words, we don't necessarily, I'm not saying that we don't, but we don't necessarily have the skills that are competitive enough when we look at other countries, especially in IT, in pharmaceuticals like China, etc., etc. Does the free trade area address that adequately enough? Then there's the whole issue of beneficiation, where we are actually sending out to bring back in to trade across borders under somebody else's T's and C's. Do we do we feel that we are addressing that well enough? And I think I jotted one more point, if I can find it. But I think, yeah, for now, those are just the main questions that I wanted to ask. So, yeah, as I said, we talk about harmonization, very, very important. But I think there are also other elements like volatility, and how do we get those to align? Volatility insofar as foreign investment and the comfort that people will come in and establish those industries that will allow us to use, for example, the raw materials that we have at our disposal in the continent, manufacture that within the continent will still require funding, and in some instances foreign investment into the country. But with the volatile status of some of our countries in the continent, that also becomes a barrier. So is it a damned if you do, damned if you don't, or where do we sit?
I will just give a short description. I think Mamburu might have a bit more to say about that piece because they're closer to the CFTA and the implementation. But what I would say, especially on the agriculture sector, is this. Most of the value chains we talk about today is a calf is born, there's no grazing, there's no disease, bad genetics. China doesn't want it as meat. Okay. What are we saying? It means we take the very known value chains from 1920 and we keep just adding what we need to add. The science and what my sister is saying there is that when you bring it in, you don't say, this is how it goes. This is what you should say. We are South Africans. We had the beef. We want to export. That's the objective. Where and how do I apply this science to still get my objective? If it means I need a feedlot, what do I do in the feedlot? If it means, a simple example, I've told you about the 3 countries that have, by the way, combined, we have less than 30 million cows, Botswana, Namibia, and South Africa, and we're the only ones exporting. Do you know how much South Sudan has, even with its wars? Over 20 million alone. Ethiopia has over 110 million cows. They don't export a single one. Now, when you sit here, you go, okay, it's good, we do it. To me, I even regard Botswana, South Africa, and Namibia as one market, if you look at it that way. So what does it mean? We should be able, with our standards, to export maybe 15 million cows a year. Then you say, what will we eat? Then we must go and clean the Ethiopian cows and eat them here. This is what should happen. We are trading, it's about the business, it's about whatever. Simple example, we have a program here in KZN that we're going to establish. How do we get the rural communities that have 10 or 15 or 20 cows to export to the UK? If you look at the current value chains, undoable. No, you must take the whole 15 villages, put them into a green zone, get the vaccines, get the medications, test all of them. Go and raise funds. There's your NEF, there's your TIA, there's Mamburu here and others that will do that. And then how do you sustain it? I've just told you for every 10,000 rand per cow, you're going to get 25 if you export. So after you took everything else, there's 5,000 rand left per cow. It means if what you are talking about is really correct, that you can get them to export. Get the first money, you will get your sustainability from the 5,000 rand that's left. That's a new value chain that you develop from that. So in short, I'm saying, while we're looking at it, how do we come up with a method, not just the science for the sake of it? How do we make sure, because we know this, how do I know it? I run around Rwanda, there's not a single commercial farmer. There's over 4 million cows. They're this close to exporting. How do they do it? Because you look at your issues, how do you use your science to solve it, and then you find a way which might be different from what the normal value chain is. And then let's go. Money will be there as long as there's profitability, private sector is coming. So we don't have to worry about investment in that. But I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think I'll touch on Dr. Olivia's point. Under the AFCFTA, we're not only looking at the trade in goods alone, we're also looking at the trade in services. So when there is a company that manufactures a particular vaccine for certain animals, there's an element whereby you can be able to train someone on the ground who will be able to administer this to the livestock on the ground. By doing so, you're actually creating the demand for the vaccine in South Africa. Then it ramps up the manufacturing, it ramps up employment and job creation, and also forex being generated in that regard. Now, you made mention about the competitiveness of certain economies on the continent, and how do we ensure that some of these things we manufacture them in the continent. Embedded in the AFCFTA is a protocol that talks on rules of origin. Rules of origin is a term that indicates that the product that will qualify for free trade on the continent should have been at least the majority of them being made, or the inputs are sourced from the continent. So in that case, we try by all means to ensure that whatever is manufactured is done in the continent. And where we cannot get such, then some of the inputs can come from abroad. Then in terms of the AFCFTA, we then have an element of investment that come into place to say, if we cannot do it ourselves, then we can then source investments and ensure that we'll be able to produce most of these products in the country. I'll give you an example in terms of the auto industry. We are now, as the GTIC, Ford, BMW, we are putting them to task to say, while you bring your German machines to be manufactured in South Africa, can some of the products, let's say the leather that is being used for the car seats, or the plastic that is being used for the bumpers, can that be sourced in South Africa and be supplied by SMMEs and women and youth-owned companies in the Republic? So that's how we try and ensure that most of the investment is then attracted in that regard. Thanks.
Thank you very much for those responses. Perhaps maybe to you, Ms. Tulsi, on the issue of standards. I'm going to pick you on. On the issue of standards that was raised, there was mention that the knowledge producers are nowhere to be found when it comes to the development of standards. And you work for a biotechnology research company. How do we bring the scientists into the fold, especially when it comes to some of these standards? Because a lot of the time, governments get hit on the knuckles to say, no, you produce mechanisms and instruments, but you don't involve us. So how do we really provide a business case to say, when it comes to these standards, science should be at the foundation of the development of these standards, also bearing in mind that science in actual fact is a cross-cutter, and how do we then bring them nicely and weave their knowledge into some of these issues?
Okay, thanks. When it comes to, firstly, when it comes to investing in biotechnology, because I think there's also a lot of expectations. If I'm investing so many $1 million into biotechnology, I want to see an immediate return on investment. So that's often a deterrent when you ask, particularly governments, because they want to see a return on investment. Biotech, to amass knowledge, to create databases, to train our scientists, takes years. So if someone is investing money now, you're only going to see results in about 5 to 10 years. And sometimes you always have an investor mismatch, whether it's a private sector or whether it's the public sector that's funding. You always have an investor mismatch, and it puts immense pressure on biotech companies to produce information and data. And that's why we always see biotech companies that are failing or struggling. As I advocated earlier on, is that we need to create this database of knowledge of our model species, of our organisms, plants, animals, and even the human genome. It needs to be a database. We need to have ownership of that data. And from that, you would see multiple technologies that will spur out of it, which will result in multiple industries being formed. It's just that there's a time period and patience and understanding from the investor as to the time it takes for this technology to actually make some kind of attraction. So.
Okay. Thank Hello. Okay. Thank you very much for those interventions. Perhaps maybe one more question that seems to be burning. Maybe I'll leave this one.
Sorry, just a last question based on a point that you raised. I was part of the COVID-19 rapid response team when in early 2020, working closely with the WHO. The president of Madagascar announced the finding of COVID organics, which is an indigenous solution, well, indigenous plant that was to treat patients with COVID. A number of African countries embraced it. However, it's, as you all know, the WHO had its issues around it. How does something like the trade area then step in? Because ultimately one of the purposes of it has to surely be to allow for the seamless or easier movement of such a product, for example, within the continent. Thanks.
Okay, one more question. One more.
For Mr. Mamburu, actually, and the DTIC. Engaging with the AFC-FTA Secretariat, I got the sense that one of the focus areas is ensuring that SMMEs participate in the AFC-FTA. To educate SMMEs and to get these women-owned businesses. What are your plans? Because we can't afford to be reactive when you look at the numbers that people talk about when we talk about the agreement. How are you being proactive in supporting those two areas or sectors?
For the first time, that one I don't even have an answer, but I can venture to say that one of the, and I think BGI, MGI here is addressing that. Part of the issues, and I'll give you a simple example. There's a plant in Guyana area in Limpopo that the traditional people there have been using to get rid of mosquitoes. And everybody in that area knew it works. And I was working for the CSIR at the time. We didn't believe it. Okay. Now, it took indigenous knowledge grouping to go and take the plant, because this is the thing. When does it actually have the compound that might kill or chase away mosquitoes? Is it in the roots? Is it because there they grab the whole thing, dry it up, burn it? You don't know where is it. Can we isolate it? Can we differentiate it? Should it be one? Is it a combination? When you burn it and you do those experiments, you can see the mosquitoes either die or they go away much better than citronella. Okay. It took the CSIR and the DSI 5 to 6 years to try and work on how to plant it. Which time of the season? Is it an oil? Is it an extraction? What is it? It was proven right. It does what we said it does. Actually, it kills a variety of mosquitoes. And it's the oil, essential oil, that can be taken out. A small factory was put up to extract. A center pivot and water was made, and that's that. The sad story is that government can do those things, which is very nice. Without any entrepreneur in it, the whole thing falls flat, because it's very nice, it can kill mosquitoes. Now we need to take it to Malaysia and the equator and everybody, and it's like, we were happy to have a job. Now it seems DSI is not funding. I think we won't have jobs anymore. You see, so it's two ways. So what am I saying with this example? As an African, as somebody who has seen something like that, usually because we don't put those standards and our own systems like BGI is helping, we do not have the counter to argue at the level that says, yes, it works, no, it doesn't work. And that is what I think, as a side of the CFTA, it means if we start developing our own things, we'll get to a point where we are able to argue at the level and scientific level that we can say, yes, it works, or no, it doesn't work, on our own terms. Not because we want it to work, because we have proven it and we can show it to others.
Yeah, to respond to you, stage of things. So the compliance that Dr. Sibia was talking about needs to have been done, and once the product is ready for market, that's when we then come in terms of ensuring that market access is granted to it, ensuring that the export licenses are being given, and the compliance that Dr. Libia has spoken about are in place. Then we're able to then take it to market and ensure that the product is traded as freely as possible if it's part of the tariff lines that we have offered on the continent. Another example, like he has mentioned, we are working closely with the Department of Science and Innovation on a particular project with Uganda. Uganda has what we call rose geranium. It's a plant that is used to develop cosmetic oil. So from the basic research side of things, they've done their part, and now applied research has been tested by the CSIR. We are struggling in terms of now funding, and entrepreneur will then be able to take this project forward. The testing, everything has been done, certifications and everything is in place, but that entrepreneur to say, can you take this project forward, is unfortunately we're not unable to get to that point. It's so frustrating because as the DTIC, the agency called Industrial Development Corporation did come to the front and say, we do have the financial resources, but we need that entrepreneur to take this forward. So we sometimes